Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. I'm just switching hats now from MC to moderator. Our next panel discussion is titled Branded Retail, New Moves by Drinks Brands in the On and Off Trade and vice versa. I'll be moderating this panel. I'll be joined on stage by Vishal Deorah. Vishal, could I have you on stage, please? Yeah, founder of the whiskey company. Minakshi Singh, co-founder of Cocktails and Dreams Speakeasy and Sidecar in NCR. Ms.Shatbhi Basu, founder of Stir Academy. Mr. Nayanabhiram, VP Restaurants, Vice President Restaurants for Bira 91. Madhurika unfortunately couldn't make it. She got stuck in Srinagar and missed her flight due to some landslides in that region, but fortunately she's safe. Good afternoon, everyone. All old friends on stage and lots of old friends in the audience also. Feels very good to be back here and back in a practically back at home. And I'd like to introduce first the panelists before I introduce the discussion topic itself and get started with the questions. First up, Minakshi Singh, co-founder of Cocktails and Dreams Speakeasy and Sidecar, award-winning bars in the NCR region, with Sidecar in particular clocking in this year as number 14 in Asia's 50 Best Bars 2022. A big hand for Minakshi. Next, Vishal Deorah, founder of the whiskey company in Guwahati, all the way from Guwahati, one of the persons who's traveled the furthest to be with us today, as also Global Spirits, a distributor in the Northeast region. Welcome, Vishal. I've got Deekonda, the Vice President for Restaurants for Bira 91, who is leading that charge into tap rooms. And finally, Ms.Shatbhi Basu, founder of the Stir Academy, one of India's most respected and seasoned voices when it comes to bars and beverages. Yeah. We'll spend about 20 odd minutes and we can start the countdown here, I think, so we know when we're running short of time. So about 25 minutes in discussing the topic at hand with getting views of different panelists, and we'll throw it open to questions and then head off to lunch. As the title of our panel says, the last few years have seen a flurry of action in terms of boundaries being blurred or crossed over. So there are drinks brands which are forward integrating into the on-trade, and in some cases retail and vice versa. With on-trade in particular, microbreweries moving to packaged retail, for example. Examples are several. They include Arbor Brewing, which began it, I think, with their cans, which they launched some time back. Red Rhino Brewing, a microbrewery in Bangalore, followed subsequently by Geist with their cans. And I think Toit is very shortly to launch. So it's interesting that particular move which has taken place, the microbrewery feeling that it is a strong enough brand to now test the waters in the consumer market from a packaged retail standpoint. We've also got beverage brands in the retail space, or consumer brands, which have said, let's move backwards or forwards into the on-trade. So examples, of course, being Bira 91, which have launched now at least 2 tap rooms that I know of, and I'm looking forward to visiting the airport one on my way out. And companies like AB InBev, which have begun the Seven Rivers Brewing. AB InBev with Seven Rivers has moved backward and forward. They've also now launched their cans, their strong wheat beer, has also moved into the retail space in Mumbai, taking advantage of the retail policies in the Maharashtra market. Yeah. In the spirits case, examples are comparatively fewer. Shall I say, we probably just had the case of Stranger & Sons, their collaboration with Bombay Canteen in Perry Road, Peru, and Diageo setting up the RCB bar and cafe in Bangalore. So I think we have a great panel which is perfectly equipped to debate and discuss these moves, as well as possibly identify what's next or what's coming to us in the future. So I'd like to get things started with Nayan. And Nayan, we've obviously seen Bira 91's growth as a phenomenal brand, shall I say, in the Indian alcobev space, and one of the pioneers of creating a brand from scratch, and one which is, I think, given inspiration a lot of Indian brands to the fact that this can be done and you guys can take on the big boys in this particular space. I'd like to understand that what led Bira 91 to pursue, shall I say, capital intensive and possibly risky diversification.
Yeah. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
So first of all, thank you for the kind words, Vikram, and thank you for having me here with some great set of people. I think for us, the Bira 91 tap rooms, we call them the limited release tap rooms. These are, in a way, are pandemic babies, right? Like, so this is a thought that has come to us when we were dabbling with a couple of ideas in the direct-to-consumer space. You know, some amazing thoughts shaped by the earlier panel also. I think the root cause goes back to there. You know, the customer is the king. And today, with consumer patterns and changing preferences evolving so fast and so drastically, what we felt was this was one such opportunity where we could present all of the innovation to the consumers firsthand and be able to sort of do a couple of iterations and get the best out of those out into the wider markets. So for example, the Imagined in India release that we recently did with the mango lassi and the kokum sour and coconut brown ale, etc. These have actually been come out of these iterations which we were able to do at the tap rooms. So for us, while yes, you're right, it's capital intensive, it's a completely new area compared to what our forte is. It started off as a pilot and the pilot was successful. We did a bunch of iterations and now we have a very clear vision that we want to take it to the national scale.
And apart from it being, say, an innovation cradle, as you mentioned, is there also a business logic from a revenue perspective that you're seeing this emerge as a distinct, separate revenue and profit center for the company?
Absolutely. So in fact, our first unit, which is the Koramangala taproom unit, has already been EBITDA positive and started contributing back to the bottom line of our organization, right? And this is probably, if I, the inside our boardrooms, the way we discuss is, if we draw a parallel with the Bira ICC investment, this is probably the first positive ROI marketing investment where you can directly see it reflecting on your bottom lines, right? So it's a fairly sustainable marketing investment.
And my last question is a corollary to the previous one, is that did you perhaps see a model of tying up with a hospitality operator as maybe a more practical route rather than going it alone?
Yes. So the thought and the idea started there when we, in fact, the first Koramangala taproom was an erstwhile beer cafe. So we actually started the pilot in that manner where beer cafe was doing our operations while we were just, focused on our beers. But then, once we started learning picking the grapevine and started understanding the nuances, it made sense for us to go all in. When the opportunity is so big, might as well just get into it all in and reap the benefits.
Thank you, Nayan. Shatbhi, just turning to you. Don't look so startled. Shatbhi, I'm looking at more from you've seen the Indian consumer at close quarters the last 20, 30 years when it comes to, say, bars and drinking out. And do you think loyalty in one domain, in this particular case, the domain is, say, building a successful brand in the retail space as consumer packaged goods, can translate logically into the on-trade, be it either beer or spirits or any category of beverages?
I think it's a starting point for sure. They will definitely go all in to begin with. But I don't think that the brand loyalty on its own will sustain over a period of time unless they can actually show them that they're able to cross over and also build on the experiences on the ground, a domain that they're not really a part of traditionally. So I think in terms of getting them in to the space, yes, their brand equity will definitely drive loyal customers, people who love and understand that brand, and will bring them into the new space 100%. But then it will be up to them to show that, yes, we're great at what we do in terms of our brand, but we can also translate that into an on-premise experience. That, I think, will be crucial for sustaining the property.
And I think that again boils down to, if you maybe, say if I say a brand's DNA, which is created, say, very successfully in the packaged goods environment, but the DNA of a great watering hole is different, right? It has a different pulse. And what exactly is that pulse which these brands which are trying to cross over should capture, in your opinion?
They need to understand that a guy drinking at home and a guy drinking in a bar are two different people. when people go out, they're looking for more than just the drink. They're looking for the whole package. They're looking for an experience. They're looking for the surrounding. They're looking for great service, which is one of the most important and the most key elements. And of course, they still want good food. So if you can get all of that together, and again, like I said, most importantly, great service, interaction, the experience on the whole, if you can get all of that in, then there is no reason why they wouldn't succeed. But it's extremely important for them to understand that a customer, when he comes to a restaurant, he's a guy, or a bar, he is absolutely looking for a place where he can unwind and he can socialize. And that is something that's completely different from how he drinks at home, with maybe a few friends or even by himself. He doesn't care about environment at that point of time. He doesn't care about the music. But when he goes out, he needs the experience along with really great service. So I think they need to understand that it's not one element alone, and that one loyalty to the brand or the profile of the brand itself will not take them far enough. They need to understand how to take the proposition of the brand and then translate it into everything else that the customer or the consumer who walks into the bar touches. If they can do that, then I think, it's a great way to get people to experience more, because they have the ability to take the strengths of that brand and translate it around everything that happens. And I think that would be really great.
Thanks, Shatbhi. And I think as a correlate to that, I mean, what struck me when you were talking about this is the fact that these brand-driven outlets, whether it's a Bira tap room or whether it's a Diageo RCB cafe, they kind of want to capture their consumer within the universe of their brand. But when the consumer's going out, they possibly want a diversity of drinking experience from a brand perspective. So do you think that's also important, or would the consumer be coming in to just, I'm only going to drink Diageo products here, Pernod products here?
So with spirits, it's a little difficult for them. But I think a lot of them have pretty wide portfolios. So yes, they will have some issues when it comes to giving people choices. And I think that if they can kind of look at it as a larger picture, I don't think they will suffer too much if they allow other brands to come in. I don't think it'll matter that much, provided they know how they're showcasing their own brand portfolio. And there are different ways in which to do things like that. I mean, you can choose to look at it, and I think, with the emerging Indian market, I think they have great opportunity to do things because our whole spirits industry in India is growing. The whole made in India is growing dramatically now. So I think, if they play it smart, they can find ways around that. They can definitely find, it will be difficult for them because the mindset is, if I have my brands, and we see that in our bars all the time, that you have one brand preference, and when you have another one there, they're all kind of taken aback, say, oh, that too? But I think, they have to look at it from the consumer perspective, and I think if they understand that, they'll realize that they still have a way of making sure that their brands stand out and not lose anything if there are other players present as well. They just have to get their act together and do it right.
Thanks, Shatbhi. Minakshi, if I could come back to you with the previous question that I asked Shatbhi, in terms of the challenges or ability of capturing that unique DNA of a great watering hole, two which you've already created in Speakeasy and Sidecar. What goes into that, and what lessons possibly can a brand like Bira or anybody else in the audience who wants to create something like this look out for?
So I think it's every brand's dream to have an on-trade space. And on-trade is the bridge that every brand needs, because there's always going to be off-trade. That's where your brand will actually sell. That's where you'll make the real money. But at the end of it, it's on-trade which is defining the experience. And I'm the middleman per se, right? So there's the brand, and there's on-trade, and then there's the final sale. And of course, I mean, every brand would want to be there where I am, because I am also day in, day out completely influencing my guests, my consumers. We are actually almost, we are trend watching on a day-to-day basis. Like really, I mean, ear to the ground is how we are. And that's what on-trade space is all about. And of course, I mean, every brand would want to, translate into that space. And why not? I mean, kudos to brands like Bira and, even Diageo for getting there. But having said that, we are living in a very, very collaborative, extremely inclusive world. And it's very, very tough to ask for exclusivity or ask for that kind of branding in a space. I mean, we've seen it with Absolute bars 20 years ago, maybe, right? We saw the ice bars internationally, and they all became tourist attractions sooner or later. They were never watering holes where people were going for a great, I mean, at that time, maybe a cosmopolitan or whichever way you were defining it. So, I mean, there is a lot of risk that the brand is taking. I think the capex is high, and I think, I mean, return of investment is a dodgy conversation to have. We can have that side chat, and it's not that easy. We are in a very, very volatile market, and we all know that. I mean, how India is, I mean, how we are towards on-trade and off-trade as well. As far as policies go and as far as the space is concerned. So there are a lot of challenges out there which I would like to kind of point out to the brands who are interested in getting that, taking onto that on-trade space. I would say that best way to go about it is to look for experts, to look for people you can collaborate with, and who can bring their expertise. I mean, at the end of it, we are professionals in that space for that very reason. And I think that is really the key, success mix, if you can get the right partnership and the right collaboration. And, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few years. We know of certain brands which are getting into on-trade, and they are going by that route. And I think that's kudos to them to having recognized that and, giving that due space.
And how are they possibly, say if a brand is moving into the on-trade, does that translate back into them from an inside perspective? Do you think, if say spirits brands in particular, are they learning things from there which influence their strategies?
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, why would I invest that much money for insights? It's a conversation and the amount of headache it takes to run on-trade. But yes, I mean, I understand the need to have that grasp over consumer behavior. It's very, very exciting. I mean, we've been in boardroom meetings where they want the calendar chock-a-block with their brand events, and then you'll be like, hey, listen, this is not how it works. I mean, if you don't, I mean, we also need to do brunches. We also need to do, beer activations. We also need to do, the consumer is coming for, not for you. And that is an understanding that what Shatbhi ma'am was saying earlier, was that you have to remember that to detach from your product in a very unemotional way. And it's tough. I get it. I mean, the bread and butters, the back end of it. And it's tough to not say, I don't want a massive signage and I don't want a massive lit up thing. I don't want the uniforms like that. It's difficult when commercials, play. And we all know that. But we've had conversations around boardrooms to say that, that can't be it. And, there is trust, there's loyalty, the consumer has to feel that I'm not being pushed into this space because I walked into it, no captive behavior, basically.
Vishal, if I could just shift direction from the on-trade to the off-trade, and you run the whiskey company, a lovely liquor store in Guwahati with more to follow, I'm sure. So far in India, own brands or home brands are a very big phenomenon in the West across categories. So far in India, we haven't seen any retail brand or store, like say any of these stores, launch their own brands of alcohol. Any reasons that you can possibly ascribe this to? We haven't seen that yet.
Hello.
Very limited examples.
I hope I'm audible, right? I'll split your question in two parts, right? So that the audience better understands the opportunity and the challenges for something like that to be launched. When you say these brands, the examples you are quoting is for organized retail, right? Why does organized retail have private labels? Because you would want a higher profit margin on something rather than selling a Pernod or a Diageo or any other brand. Now, to produce anything in large numbers is the target where you have to make your own private label, right? To do that, you have to have an organized back-end retail chain. Because of the excise policies within the country, except a few states, one person cannot own more than one retail license. So, organized retail cannot develop. Now, within the few states that there is organized retail right now, the volumes to create something on a domestic platform is still higher because the laws to distribute a domestic brand within the country is much tougher than to make something abroad and bring it as a BIO and sell it. Now, as to your definition of what people are not doing BIO brand, in BIO space, there are private labels. I'll give you an example of Lake Forest Wines, Gurgaon. If you visit their counter, they would have a lot of wine labels which they are personally bringing as private labels. But the problem is, they are not highlighting them that this is my private brand. And they are not selling it. They are selling it out par with the 10 brands on the shelf saying that this is also from France, you can buy it. So, our industry, until and unless the organized retail gets picked up volume and there is enough stores for a company to sustain a brand, creating one will not have value addition to the company. Smaller players with small retails do bring in brands, right? But most of them are profit driven, not quality driven. So if you look at an example of a supermarket chain like Aldi, now their wines have been constantly winning some of the best wines in the world, beating wines which are 10 times pricier. Because there is an entire back end which is designed to bring the most value for money wine for the market at the right price. So that mindset has to shift only when there is an organized retail at the ground level. When I have multiple stores across multiple states, that is only when you will see private labels coming out from the retailer end, which the retailer will say that this is my private label and I'm proud of it, you should try it. So that has been one challenge why you do not see private labels which are highlighted as private, though they are there. And most of them are there on the BIO front. On the domestic front, what is happening is you will still have private labels, but they are part of a cartel. So you see these retail chains, 100, 200, 300 stores in different names, but they are all owned by one chain or a group of cartel. They will launch their value brands, especially used to happen in markets in the north. They will launch their own brands and they will push out the existing brands which are selling and they would try to set up a market for them. But then again, they were not highlighted as part of a brand which belongs to a chain. They were always highlighted as an independent brand. There is a reason why, though it exists, it is not at mass. And even if it is at mass, it is not legally part of a retail chain.
And so hypothetically speaking, a little bit of crystal ball gazing, if the organized retail landscape were to change, fingers crossed, are there any categories which you think are low-hanging fruit to enter from that perspective?
Look at any FMCG organized retail today. Let's say even if you go to a big bazaar, for any product you buy, next to there is a fresh and easy sauce or there is a fresh and easy washing powder or something, right? So private labels is the way to make money for any company. And as you are into an organized retail, the amount of percentage of retail margin that is there within the trade is already very low. So how do you generate extra margins? Either I can push the companies for margins or I can come up with products which will give me a better return on investment, right? So once the organized retail does enter the alcohol industry, which Vikram today I am telling you in the public forum, in a year you will have some of the biggest companies in India entering into organized retail in alcohol. And once that happens, you would see much clearer policies. You might see a policy where the entire India market price of alcohol becomes the same. We'll also see policies where these brands start picking up brands and start putting up on the shelf and tell them that this is my private label. So that will happen.
Thank you, Vishal. And I said fingers crossed for that. Minakshi, just turning to you, the pandemic especially saw cocktail bars across India, including yours, launch products in the area of, say, cocktail mixers, right, which could be easily mixed by consumers at home. And subsequently, that space has also spiraled out from a packaged goods perspective. There are a number of companies in the space, both in terms of cocktail mixers as well as the RTD products, either in cans or in bottles. But is that possibly an opportunity missed from a bar perspective, something you think that you might have liked to pursue, or is that still on the anvil possibly?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always in our radar, and given an opportunity and I mean the kind of time, and like let's reverse this conversation on earlier what you said. Obviously, it's not our forte. It's not something that I come from. That's not in our DNA either. I know the product, but how to get the product to the consumer from that angle, from the retail angle, is not something that I know of. So I wouldn't be, it'll be foolhardy for me to say that, you know, I mean, I'm going to launch it all by myself and I'm going to do this. But yes, like I said earlier, that I think that choose the right partners, get the right people to work with who understand this, what we're talking about, retail and modern retail and the space, which is absolutely like a jigsaw all the time and yearly it changes. To understand that space better and to make a success of it, I mean, we are pretty thorough like that. So I think that's where the key would be to collaborate and partner with people who would know. I can, of course, give you a lot of product insight, a lot of product story. Like we can define all of that, branding to marketing to, everything else. But it's the final leg which matters the most. And that's where your, price matters the most, and what the consumer is going to do with it is where I think the story has to be defined much more clearly. So I think there is that gap that I need to, recognize and address. And I should find people like that. And of course, I mean, there is a huge opportunity for bars across India. Having said that, I think almost a lot of the senior mixologists, bartenders, I mean, we know of they're making great products and actually are getting into the market, and we've seen that, right? We've seen Varun doing some fantastic stuff with his even Bose and Pankaj are doing. So I mean, there are things that we are seeing, and I mean, they've partnered with people who have backed them up with the right, route to market and the chain, and are giving them the right advice. So that's where the combination is.
I think in that respect, the Stranger and Bombay Canteen collab was a interesting.
Vikram, I would add one thing to Minakshi.
Yeah, Vishal.
So we were the first store to actually stock bitters which were made by her company,
yes,
Cocktail and Drink. So they're not just cocktails, they were also making bitters. So there's an opportunity always to expand.
Yes, thank you, Vishal, for that.
Yeah, in that respect, I think the Stranger Bombay Canteen collab is an interesting one, which I think was widely successful and which they plan to replicate every year with a different. What's your opinion or take on that?
It's fabulous. I think it's just the need of the hour. It's the kind of collaboration we want to see. Find a brand that you can vibe with. Find a brand that you have similar values with. And I think they found that partnership really well. And I think taking that forward in an on-trade and an all-India level of trade is just what dreams are made of. I think every brand would want that, and I mean they should at least aspire to get that kind of a partnership in place, because you want that endorsement. What Bombay Canteen can give, I don't think that they themselves could bring that endorsement on the table. So I think that was a fabulous thing that happened to us. I mean, we saw that happening on ground, and I mean, a lot of us have dreamt of it. One day my cocktail will reach the shelf. The fact that it did, and we all got to taste and buy it, and that many people, and it's growing. And we know of the fact that they are coming up with the next one. And again, like I think the fact that there's a lot of crossover within industry, which is also really exciting, and must be acknowledged that a lot of bartenders and F&B professionals have gotten into the other end of spectrum as well in terms of industry crossover. I think a lot of learnings have gone back and forth, and you can see that happening very interestingly. I mean, they're not necessarily only MBA graduates who are, coming into the space.
And without disclosing any secrets, shall I say, hypothetically speaking, if you were to venture into the space, what are the 3 categories that you might look at?
Cocktails. And cocktails.
It could be cocktails, spirits, could be anything. Only cocktails, or would you look at a...
Definitely cocktails, number one. I mean, we have done a lot of work on it as well. So I think I'm really confident in that space. And that's a day-to-day space that I'm operating on. So definitely that. I think for all the commercial reasons that we've spoken about multiple times, gin, because I mean I make it today and sell it tomorrow, and that is the best option possible with the costs, with the kind of capex that it takes to really launch a brand. Rum is a very interesting space as well. I think India is suited for rum production. Even from the historically and environmentally, region-wise, all of that. I mean, the climate suits us, and we are a major, very big rum consumer already. I think just how gin got an upgrade with greater than, I think rum can also get that upgrade, and I think Makazai is in that space, and it's time that I mean, there more people need to join that party soon.
Well, if Sidecar launches a gin, then you heard it here first. Yeah, but that it's interesting because if you do launch a product, if any other bar does launch a product in this space, then you want other bars to also stock that product. So that bar shouldn't see that as a potential. What do you think, Shatbhi? You think that might be a conflict to other bars stocking that product if they see it's coming from a rival bar? Or are people more open now in their minds?
I think we're more open now. I think people are more open now. You know that by the fact that they have guest shifts from other bars, and it doesn't really bother them. You have bartenders from one bar going to another bar. They're far more open, they're far more collaborative today than they ever were. So I don't see that as an issue at all. I think these crossovers work when you begin with the premise that you know what you want your end result to be. So even when it's a spirit crossing over into on-premise, if they know why they're doing that, then I think everything else will fall into place. If they're talking about their own experiences, they still know that they can give their experience and yet create a place that is good for the consumer. And a consumer who enters that space already knows that he's coming into that space because of the brand equity or the loyalty he has towards that brand. So as a premise, he's okay going into that space, saying that yes, well, it is, say for example, a company A brand that's doing it. I'm likely to see the rest of their portfolio. I may not probably see competitive brands there, but the fact that I'm going there is good. It's then up to the brand to make sure the guy stays there and keeps coming back by getting everything else correct. If he can do that, then I think a customer can be happy within that environment, because it's not that he wants to go there every single day, but he's perfectly happy looking at that experience.
Yeah, it can't be just a vanity play for doing it, right? There has to be a concrete. Yes,
Just a quick add-on. I mean, I think you forgot to mention Pistola, which is the yeah.
I just saw
Hey.
a crossover walk in.
Yeah, so we of course stock them as well as sell them, and I don't think there is any concern there.
Thanks. I'm sure Raksha will be pleased to hear that. Raksha, we were talking about the fact that if you produce a brand as a bar, then would other bars have an issue in stocking that particular brand? But I think things have moved on considerably since the last 10 to 15 years. And
We're actually happy for them.
I know.
Therefore, we're like hip hip and all that.
Yeah, and we have another panel discussion later on collaborations. In fact, we've seen how people are now. It's the earlier kind of dog eat dog, shall I say, world has changed considerably. And if I could now move on to the skill side or the expertise side of the spectrum, and just maybe talk to Nayan first. You talked about it, the fact that you got your fingers wet, but how easy or difficult was it to get that part of the business right from a skills perspective, something you've never done before?
So I think we as a brand over the last 6-7 years of existence, we could say that fairly well that we probably know how to brew, we probably understand the beers, but very soon we realized in our first pilot with Beer Cafe, for example, that a bar or an experience, like Nan said, consumer is walking into a bar for a full experience. It's a comprehensive 360-degree experience. We can't just be riding on the fact that, we've got the greatest set of beers and we've got the most innovative beers, and therefore just come to us and just enjoy these, right? So that's when, we started investing in the F&B aspect, which is beyond the beers, which is the entire cocktails or the overall bar experience. We work with a lot of you guys, a lot of in industry experts, and we've taken a lot of expertise from different people. It's all about the community of this F&B, right? So, for example, it need not just be an organization, like an individual like Vicky Ratnani chef. He's the one who is actually curating and helping us create the entire food menu. So the innovation on food is equally important, if not more, when it comes to the overall experience. And in India, at the end of the day, food is quite centric to any walking consumer, right, of a restaurant. Similarly with the bars, right, like we work with Magandi, we've engaged with Minakshi and Yangut in the past. And we have done a lot of innovation on the craft side of cocktails. And we continue to present those. So while our key promise is a new beer released every week, the central theme continues to be beer, but it's the overall F&B which we have put those pieces of puzzle together with the right people, right team, right SOPs, right controls and so on. And now we have a model which is scalable, because even our beers and the innovation that we do in beers is all centralized. It's almost like a hub and spoke. So it's not so capital intensive as it may look like, because these are just the tap rooms while the brewing is happening centrally. So it's a lot more, it's basically innovation with an eye to scale, if I could put it in that way.
And Vishal, just touching upon from the retail perspective, we've seen one small example of, say, Anheuser-Busch in Mumbai with their and retail stores plus an e-commerce storefront. And about 15 years ago, Diageo had launched their Johnny Walker branded stores in Mumbai, I remember. As the retail environment possibly opens up, we get e-commerce in, do you see any kind of a threat to your business from brands coming into the retail space and setting up their stores, and especially with the fact that they understand this thing at a global level from a category management, merchandising, best practices perspective?
To be very honest, in whichever industry you see organized retail entered, the synergies they have at forward integration and backward integration, and the overall reduction in cost that brings for them operational wise, pushes out a lot of the existing players out of the market. You have seen in every industry you have found. The good thing about alcohol industry today is the fact that though the product might come through an organized industry, but then it is a product of impulse. You basically cater to a 500 meter area next to you, right? Most of the brands are available at your outlet, are also available at that branded outlet which is going to open. Because of the excise policy of a state, no brand can be not given to you until unless it's even if it's your private label. When it gets distributed through a third party, and they have the right to buy it, right? So if I'm walking down the road, and even if I'm looking for something very particular, then I'll go to a shop where I say, let's discover something else. But your everyday grab, will you fight with a store which is 500 meters next to your house or somewhere else, right? So there's space for everybody. People who will look for a higher experiential form of retailing, people who will look for a higher form of brand discovery, will walk into these stores, right? Because they're looking for something particular. But on everyday basis, 25 days out of the 30 days, you will pick it up from the store which is nearest to you. Given the real estate cost and given the fact that how restrictive the industry is, even multiple players come, there is still space for everybody to survive. So we don't have much of a problem that way. But yes, we would have a problem in this space if the back end gets into a situation where it's cartelized. In that way, if the stocks are getting cut off for regular retails and are only pushed and available at these outlets, then we would suffer. But otherwise, it's not a problem. And Vikram, I would also wanted to add one thing from the first point of conversation you said, that why don't you still see these brands coming from these retails? And I told you one example where the retail owner does not tell you that it is their brand. You have to understand something. When you buy something, you buy it out of the goodwill, right? A brand extension always happens through goodwill. Abba is trying to brew its can. You believe in the fact that Abba makes some of the best beer they're making. So when you see it at a store, you would pick it up because you know that Abar banaya hai to acha hai. Right? Right now, organized retail has not given that much confidence to a buyer, where you see his brand name being associated to a product and you knowing ki no, this is world class. Right? So till the time branded retail chains don't come up and get that goodwill in the market, their products will always be looked down upon.
I think that's a great point, Vishal. Yeah, that's a lovely point. Thank you for that. One last question which I'm posing to all of you before I throw it open to the audience for questions. And I'll start with Shatbhi for this. What's easier, do you think? Do you think it's easier for an on and off trade outlet to start their own brand, or for an established brand to venture into the on trade or the off trade?
I would think it's easier for the established spirit brand or alcohol brand to enter into our spaces simply from the fact that they have deeper pockets. So they are able to do things that an entrepreneur may not be able to do. So from the perspective that Minakshi was saying, that she would love to do this, this and this, but she also knows that the kind of capital she would need is not something that she has ready and available, because her focus is the bar and the restaurant. But when there is a collaboration, then it becomes much easier for everyone around, because each person then contributes with their own expertise. So I think, if it's one against the other, it's the Alcobev brand that definitely has deeper pockets, and they are definitely able to do this far easier than single entrepreneurs. But the smart thing, of course, would be to use expertise and be collaborative, and you get the best of both, because each one contributes to the other, and you can then create brands that appeal to the consumer in a way that's, different, but at the same time, it gets the best of both. So how could that be bad, Yeah, don't just look at me like that, Himanshu. You've got to have a bigger smile. Seriously.
Thank you, Shatbhi. Nayan, what about you? Although you may possibly be biased, but still, I'd love to hear their opinion.
Well, coming from a brand, it's a difficult question to answer. But see, I think, just to add to Shatbhi ma'am's point, I think the entry barrier for a brand to get into retail is far lesser compared to the vice versa. But what is most important, whichever direction you see, is to be able to deliver on the promise consistently, right? So while it's easier to enter, to be able to succeed and to be able to really resonate with the consumer with your core promise is where the real game is. And I think, there's chance for in both ways. If you look at the West, for example, a lot of this entire craft beer revolution, I mean, we're talking about a country like America with over 10,000 craft brewers, right? Whether it's a Boston Beer or Sierra Nevada or Stone, etc., which have been making such big noises in terms of their large acquisitions, closer to $1 billion valuations now, by the large behemoths like Kirin or AB InBev and so on. But they all started as craft. Yes, sorry?
Dogfish Head just got taken over by Piazza.
Exactly. So, and these are like East meets West, right? Like Kirin, Asahi, all the way from Japan, going to the US and investing in West Coast. So I think, there's great opportunity, but the important thing is the authenticity and the consistency. But yeah, in terms of entry barriers, it may be easier for a brand to get into the retail space.
The same question.
No.
No, so I don't think that, of course, 100% agreed about the barriers, but if you were to keep the barriers aside and the angle of finances and money aside, I think it's equally challenging either way. And we'll have to remember that where the expertise lies and that you're going in a new territory, and the new territory can also end up diluting your brand in a certain way and extending your bandwidth to something that you might not have put that much energy in the first place. Because if you are successful doing one thing, what was the need that made you go there? So you'll have to really like dig deep and be fully committed to going ahead with something like this. I mean, there is a huge risk. You always take. I mean, any diversification is a risk. So, because of course, I mean, that's where equity is everything. And so if you're going there, then keeping the money and the risks aside, it's a huge challenge, I think, either way.
Vishal?
I would add to something for the taking an example of Bira. Sometimes brands do enter this space not just because of the fact that it is the cost of the entry which is higher. Sometimes it is the future of the brand which is tied to them entering. I'll give you a small take on my side from Bira, because I also look after the distribution of Bira for East India. If you see the Bira portfolio, when Bira started, they did the Bira White, the wheat beer which revolutionized entire India, right? Now if you see any beer company, they all have a wheat beer. If you go to any microbrewery, they all have a wheat beer. That is all selling right. So now for them, the challenge would be to finding the next Bira White. What is the next growth driver in the market? So sometimes these investments from the companies go beyond just brand building. They also grow to find future cash cows, which they want to go out. So they are not looking to compete with the F&B market as per se, but they are also looking at finding their information and their R&D so that they can compete on the other side of the market, which is off trade. Right? So I believe sometimes it is not about a financial thing that just because it's easy for a company to enter, they enter. Sometimes they also enter because it gets added to the survivability in the long run.
Thank you, Vishal, and thank you all for a fascinating discussion. I'd love to now throw it open for questions. We've got Himanshu. Can we get a mic to Himanshu, please? Planning to open a single malt bar soon.
This is a very specific question to the ladies at the panel. We've talked about and we've worked with you, Shatbhi, on mint juleps and slings and whiskey sours and everything. Apart from if you put gin and tonic aside, is there going to be a cocktail that would represent India in the world? Because you come from that space. And can there be a cocktail which would go into the history of, bartending and be part of courses that if you are doing an Indian cocktail, it's not just adding alcohol to a mango lassi. Over to you.
Ooh. Actually, there's quite a few that you can bring forward. We, I think, do really great work with Indian ingredients. We've created some fabulous cocktails that can. I think what we need is to be able to push them there, to showcase them right up front, instead of just being happy with what we do, which is what usually ends up happening. You know, we're so happy with what we create, and we're just happy that people are drinking it, but we've never really gone out to make the effort to put it out there, to say, hey, look what we're doing. So I think the day we wake up to that, what's been happening is everyone is so focused. I'm one of those rare ones who's not, which is why I get kind of knocked down sometimes. It's that whole thing about bring back the classics. So we're so focused on the West that we forget about who we are. And we've got far more to offer the world, I think, than they have to offer us. And I think if we realize that, and if we get there, maybe we'll make the effort to take the drinks that we already make really, really well, but to actually put them out there.
Thank you, Shatbhi.
Yeah. So, Himanshu, I think that Indian spice story has just started, and I feel that there's a lot happening in that space. We did a little bit of work a few months back with the government of Delhi to look at the spice story and what's happening, and obviously like really trying to geolocate and say that okay, we are focusing on the Delhi NCR market and what are the ingredients that we can come up with and really own that space, right? And there is a lot of intrigue there. A lot of international brands are coming into India for the spices and are looking for flavors. You can see that in the West. I mean, there is a space in which the gin is kind of is holding up, and I don't know how long that's going to go up now. So it's we're so I think India is in that space where it is a very very I mean, apart from having said that, I mean, calling it exotic is almost like cliche, but it's reaching that space that we are looking very inwardly now instead of and we saw that in the earlier conversations about how local grown and how the whole made in India story is glorifying, and so much, it has so much more to say than something that we brought from the West. And I mean, you guys are the flag bearers of that, so so I think that's the space in which we need to look at.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Time for one last question. If anybody has a question, otherwise we'll wrap it up and move to lunch. Okay, thank you all. Thanks a lot. Could I call on stage Dhanand DJ? Could I request you to do the honors with the mementos before we break for lunch?